Let's return to what we were seeing about an hour ago, because the IMF managing director has been speaking, and the global economy is likely to avoid a recession despite the hit to growth from President Trump's tariffs rollout. That was according to remarks made in the last 60 minutes by the head of the IMF. In a speech ahead of the spring meetings next week, she conceded that the stop-start US tariffs plans has fueled market volatility not seen since the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, some of Asia's major exporters, Vietnam, Japan and Taiwan, have opened negotiations with Washington. Well, let's hear a little more of what the head of the IMF has been saying.
Trade distortions, tariffs and non-tariff barriers have fed negative perceptions of a multilateral system seen to have failed to deliver a level playing field. We see these distortions in the following two graphs. The first tells us that while in the first 2 decades of this century the world saw a good convergence toward a low and stable US effective tariff rate, progress stalled in the last decade.
Well, let's speak to Paul Johnson, the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, who's here, as you see, in the studio with me. What do you make of a pretty clear-eyed assessment there of where we are?
Yeah, a pretty strong statement or restatement of the argument against tariffs, of the reasons why what President Donald Trump has done is going to undermine growth across the world. The extent to which this has created enormous uncertainty for businesses and in markets, and the scale of the risks that we all face over the next period. Now, the IMF's central forecast is that we won't have a worldwide recession, but they have significantly downgraded their view about what growth will be as a direct result of the actions of the White House. And of course, there are risks alongside that if the markets react worse than is currently expected.
Lots even now that we don't know, because we don't know how long and where this trade war and tariffs is actually going to go in the coming months. And therefore, we don't know the amount of hit to growth we're going to actually see. You talk about the risks as well. Tell me more about the risks you see in all of that then.
Yeah, I mean, what you've described is part of the problem. Companies, indeed countries, find it very hard to respond when there's so much uncertainty. We don't know what the US is going to do over the next few months. So even if tariffs have a positive effect, for example, in the US over the long run, and that's a big if firms don't know what's going to happen to those tariffs, they can't even plan for that. And in the same way, countries can't really plan for how they are going to trade with the US over this period. Now, what we've seen up till now has been wild gyrations in the stock markets, which affect everybody's pensions and savings. We've also seen an increase in the cost of US government debt. This is an indication that the world is beginning to get actually quite worried about investing money into the United States. Now, if that starts to snowball, if we have more, if we have a return to the kinds of tariffs that we had the 90-day pause on, then you can imagine markets going down again very dramatically, and people really losing confidence in what has for a long, long time been the world's most stable, biggest economy, and essentially where people put their money to keep it safe.
And remarkable levels of uncertainty, because you and I were just chatting a moment or two ago. We were looking at what Donald Trump has posted on Truth Social, his attack on the Fed chair. He's really going after him, and people in America are actually openly talking about the possibility of whether Donald Trump could fire him. I don't think constitutionally he can, but he is really going to war with the Fed chair. Yeah,
and it's really quite worrying. I mean, this is another attack on economic institutions, which actually served the US and the world pretty well for a long period of time. If he really tries to unseat the chair of the Fed, that's going to create more turmoil. And of course, the chairman is only doing his job. I mean, their job is to keep a stable inflation rate. Well, what are tariffs going to do in the US? They're going to increase inflation. That's going to reduce the chances that interest rates come down. Of course, what Donald Trump is saying is, I want you to cut interest rates. Well, if his job is to keep inflation down, he's not going to be cutting them, certainly as fast as elsewhere.
Paul Johnson, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us here on Verified Live.